What I liked so much about it was the harmony's different. Even though it's an old Dixieland, if that, for lack of a better term, song, it's the suspended sixth on everything in the melody sets you right up for a different harmonic climate. And then when it kind of goes with the cycle dominance on the back end of the song, it reminds me of Jacob de Bandolim. It's really cool.
Yeah, a little tension in the relation there.
Well, because like with bluegrass stuff, it's kind of like the infinite varieties of 1, 4, and 5, and adding two beats here, the way the forms work in the genre, and I could see why there was a thirst for adding jazz things. Grisman adding jazz things to it to broaden its scope.
Yeah, I guess it was inevitable.
Yeah.
Things evolve and get mixed up, and all get thrown into the soup.
What I kind of found interesting about that is it really is also taking, the Django Reinhardt influence, but still bringing it into that bluegrass vocabulary. It's stretching out just a little, and it really is. It's kind of this weird hybrid in that interpretation.
Yeah. Well, and what we're hearing here too is the beginning of that. Yeah, I just call it a language that Tony Rice used. And man, this is like the beginning of it. The pull-offs, the hammer-ons, and it's designed for that instrument, like pathways that are reachable and that you can have the strength to do. It's hard for me to describe, but it's not like something you'd work out on paper and then try to just play it on a keyboard. It's unique to a Martin D28 with high action.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
he's doing what's possible, kind of, and I don't want to use the word easiest, but some of those hammer-ons and pull-offs and just finding a way to express on that instrument that really hadn't been done before. I mean, that's different than Doc,
right?
too.
Yeah.
Doc played fiddle tune melodies. These are like uniquely one-of-a-kind phrases, and Tony took those, I think, and just expanded them even more. Because I heard...
Now, I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. How much variety was there in their improvising? How much were they playing their kind of licks on things? And because a lot of times with guitar,
Yeah.
it sounds like it's these prearranged finger positions that you're arpeggiating,
Right.
basically. And how much of that is like real improvising? I mean, Bird played licks, but Bird's really improvising.
Yeah.
Up there,
I think it's more like, if you wanted an analogy, it'd be more like Coltrane, where you hear him almost taking the same solo every time, just picking up where he left off. I call it improvising, but it's his identifiable phrases and stuff come up.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff's worked out.
Well, yeah, I don't like the word worked out though, because it's almost like I use the same phrases speaking that I use every day. Kind of, I'll say, "Hey man, how's it going?" And it's that "Hey man." I guess it's worked out, but it's also just identifies who you're listening to, and it's hard to define improvising in that way for me.
Sure.
Because it's fresh. It's like it's happening now, but yeah, they've used those phrases before, so it's hard to put your finger on it.
Well, I think it's similar to jazz in that you've got riffs and you've got anchors and you've got things that kind of work around on this turnaround or whatever. But yeah, partly what we're going to be seeing as we go through these tunes is that expansion of that vocabulary, of that improvisation, where we're getting into free bluegrass at one point, as opposed to free jazz.
Yeah.
But another thing about the layout of that fretboard and the guitar, to pick up on you're talking about, Todd, is that part of the sound of bluegrass, and this is something that jazz guitarists kind of miss, is that the open strings, like you said, playing with what's there, the open string and the ringing of those open strings and the positions of the chords that make that sound, that's that bluegrass sound, is really important. And I've played with jazz players who think they can play, a G up the neck or something, and it doesn't work. It sounds wrong because they're missing out on the open strings. That's so much
like fiddle playing.
Yeah.
Well, there's
play stuff against the open strings.
There's no shame in a capo in bluegrass. Like I know jazz, a capo, it's supposed to be like a crutch or something. But it's not. You need to pull off to that open G string no matter where the capo is,
Yeah, there's no shame in blues playing with the capo either, right?
Yeah, because there's a similarity with the open strings that are so important. And so what that capo allows you to do is if now you're in A, which is a very typical fiddle tuning, or key, you capo because now you're playing the G form, a couple frets up, but you still get that G run sound, you get that open string thing, and it allows you to keep that sound and that vocabulary, and that's why a lot of times people, I explain that to them of why the capo is absolutely necessary to keep that sound right, and it's also used to create a different voicings and to move around.
The best is putting the capo in on an E instrument like guitar. You put the capo on E flat, way up there. You're out of real estate. It sounds great.
Yeah,
it's all kind of pinched and strange sounding.
Hard to call it a guitar anymore, way up there. But yeah,
But if you're recording with two guitars, when you've got one down doing the open thing, you can put the other up on a higher voicing like that, and it makes for a nice blend. So there's lots of different reasons to do it.
Original stuff, new sounds.
That's an everyday occurrence here in Nashville, man.
Hey,
There's 400 people out there doing that right now in the studio. But back to is it improvised or not? I would say even though they use this some of the same phrasing and techniques and tricks, if you want to call it that, it never quite happens the same way twice. So that's why I'm just saying it's kind of fresh every time. And especially Clarence, he'll shift a phrase that he plays. That note might start on a downbeat. Next time he might start the same phrase on the one backbeat later. And he said himself he's just trying to screw up the band, see if they could hang on. You get used to hearing, one da 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 da, and then you go da 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 da. I don't know, I can't sing it, but play those same phrases off a beat. And
Bird would do the same thing where it was like see if you could pull it off. Pulling a rabbit out of your hat.
Yeah.
It's like pull off this magic trick, and then you look over at the band like, I did pull it off. Did I mess you up?
Yeah. And
and it's also the way you dovetail your phrasings together. You
Sure.
might be doing part of it's a lick, but you start it different and you end it different with a different paint stroke.
Yeah.
Brush stroke.
Yeah.
Great. So let's get on to our next cut here and talk about the great Tony Rice. And Tony was born in Southern California, if I recall correctly. There's a lot of great players that came out of California, and not just Utah. So to me, there's kind of bluegrass guitar before Tony and then after Tony. I mean, his influence is so dominating on like Doc Watson, what came after. I mean, you've got the big three. You got Doc, then you got Clarence, then you got Tony, and so we'll talk a little bit more after the cut too. But this cut I chose is EMD, which was the very first cut on the very first David Grisman Quintet album, which was about 1976.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I first heard the album because I was taking guitar lessons from a local musician here in Marin County, Derek Tunes, who was a great guitar player and later violinist and composer. He composed one of the first pieces, the first original music that the Kronos Quartet played.
Oh, yeah.
And then his brother, achieved some acclaim as the bass player for Frank Zappa for many years. And anyway, I was kind of trying to learn jazz, and Derek, one time I went over and he just handed me this album. He said, "This is the shit. You got to hear this. This is the hippest thing going, man. You got to check this out." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, there's guitar in there. Great." And of course, I heard those mandolins.
Yeah.
And one of the unique things for someone who had been around bluegrass, my uncle was a bluegrass bass player and played with Laurie Lewis and things. He was in the original what were they called? The Phantoms of the Opry. I don't know if you remember that. Remember that band?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I grew up around bluegrass, but I was into jazz and more hip stuff and not that corny old music. And there was no banjo in the Grisman Quintet. There was a second mandolin, and that kind of shifted it. You know, it's almost like the guitars in Django Reinhardt Ensemble or something. When you pulled that banjo,
it was a new flavor for sure. Yeah.
Right, and so and that just combination of the swing jazz kind of thing in the bluegrass was just totally fresh, totally original. Never heard anything like it before, and that's what got me started down my path. And so let's listen to EMD, and then we'll talk about it.